Perak HaMoicher, Beis Kor, Daf Kuf Dalid, sponsored Refuah Shlema for Shalom Aaron Ben Chana. The Mishnah on Kuf Gimel Amid Beis distinguished between one who sells land, stipulating Beis Kor B'midas Chevel, a base core of land measured by a rope, and a base core Hen Chaser Hen Yaser, be it more or less. The first represents a sale of an exact measurement of land. The seller must refund the buyer for any less. The buyer must refund the seller for any more. The second represents an approximate sale. The refund depends on the amount of excess land. The Gemara discusses a case where he stipulates base core stop, without any qualifications. The law for this case cannot be inferred from our Mishnah. The implication from the Mishnah is an exact measurement is only when the seller stipulates land measured by rope, excluding a base core stop. However, the Seifa states, where he stipulates be it more or less, the sale is an approximate amount of land, excluding a base core stop. The Gemara brings a brisa that includes a base core stam with stipulations ki base core o hen chaser hen yaser, representing sales of approximate amounts. Our Mishnah states approximate sales stand when a discrepancy more or less is up to a base rova lissa, 1/24th of a sa, 7.5 kabs per core. If it is more, the buyer must purchase the additional land up to 9 kabim. The Mishnah explains the buyer cannot refund the land, liapos koach hamocher, to protect the seller from getting stuck with a parcel of land too small to cultivate profitably. A challenge. The Gemara brings a brisa stating that the Chachamim also strengthened the position of the buyer. If the excess was more than 7.5 kabim per core, the Chachamim compelled the seller to sell the additional land to the buyer to prevent an intrusion into the buyer's land. The resolution. The brisa agrees with the Mishnah that a seller always has rights to sell or retain the excess. The brisa refers to a case of a price fluctuation that occurred between the time of the sale and the refund. If real estate prices dropped and the seller wants to sell, the Chachamim compel him to sell at the present lower price so the buyer does not lose. Similarly, if the price rose, he cannot compel the buyer to purchase at the new higher price, since the buyer could claim he would never have purchased the land originally for such a price. The Gemara now brings a dispute concerning the ruling of the Mishnah that a buyer can return an excess of 9 kabim. He is not required to purchase it. 9 kabim is a minimum independent field the seller can cultivate profitably. Rav Huna holds the seller does not forego a plot that size, regardless the size of the sale. Rav Nachman holds that the seller forgoes 7.5 kabim for every core. If he sold 10 core, he forgoes 75 kabim. Although a considerable size, it is small in relation to the overall sale. The 9 kav measure of the Mishnah applies only to sales of a core, where it exceeds a kav per saw. The same is true for the sale of a vegetable garden. According to the Tanakama, the buyer returns a half kav excess for a garden the size of a saw. The excess is more than a quarter kav per saw, and a half kav can be cultivated profitably. According to Rabbi Akiva, the excess of a quarter kav is for a sale of a chetzi saw. The Gemara concludes with a few related questions. Number 1, if a grain field became usable as a vegetable garden, or a once usable vegetable garden became usable only for a grain field, the Gemara is undecided if returning the excess follows what it was or what it is. If, for example, the excess for a 2-saw garden was a kav, as a garden, a buyer could refund the excess since it is significant as a garden, but as a field, an excess of a kav is insignificant, and the buyer must purchase it. Number 2, a brisa states if the excess is next to another field belonging to the seller, the buyer can return any amount of excess. What if there is a pit, an irrigation canal, a public path, or a hedge of palms? Does each subsequent one separate his field more from the excess, requiring the buyer to purchase and not return it, or not? The Gemara remains undecided. If you're enjoying Daf and 5, please click on the link below, subscribe, and become a sponsor. Have a good Tvach, a Shavua Tov.